Amen. So, whoops, sorry about that. We are going to continue our study of the Ten Commandments. So we're in Exodus 20, verse 15. The Hebrew is 2 words. You probably have this verse memorized. If not, you will. We'll read it once. You'll have it memorized. In the Hebrew, the word no is the word lo, L-O, and then it's the word steal. Don't steal, basically, is the Hebrew. So this is the third command that is just 2 words. So there it is, Exodus 20, verse 15, you shall not steal. For fun, I was trying to think of fun stories in history that kind of illustrate this. I've got 3 for you, and they just get more entertaining. The first is this cat, Abraham Lincoln. This is the oldest portrait we have of Abraham Lincoln. It was taken 1846 to 1847, right after he was elected to the House of Representatives. And one of the more famous stories, probably legendary, but I couldn't verify it, but I couldn't unverify it, is the famous story of he's working in retail, and he realizes he has shortchanged a customer. He walks 2 miles to give her like 2 pennies or whatever it is. And that is where we get the title of Honest Abe. Abe Lincoln was an honest man. Now, he was quite a shrewd politician, so I'll let you, work through all of that. But nevertheless, that's the famous story of Honest Abe. And it really is it's a sort of an American myth that is what we want to become. We want to be that honest. We're willing to walk multiple miles to give someone a few pennies. Well, let's look at the opposite, shall we? I wish we all had that sort of integrity. One of my wife and I favorite stories in the world. My wife is an art teacher. Artsy people are weird, but she's an art teacher. In 1990, this is known as the Isabella Stewart Garden Museum heist. I don't know if you've heard of this story. It's a fascinating story. In the middle of the night, a couple guys, I think it's 2 guys, come in dressed as police officers. And say that they've been called out, they need to check things out, and the security guards let them in. They tie up the security guards, and they rob the place. And because Isabella Stewart has a very particular will, after 13 pieces of priceless art was stolen, the will said that those pieces of art can never come down. They cannot loan those artworks out to other museums. Because you understand this, that if you were to go buy a work of art, you would then loan it out to, say, UK Art Museum. So you own it, but it's been loaned out, and they display it for you. So it does provide some security. It's not, you're not being selfish with the work of art, which ought to be shared, but also it's probably safer than in your basement. Okay, and so because these were her arts, it was not to be removed. So what remains are the frames. You can see that is an empty frame. That is an empty frame. And you can look this up. There's 13 works of art were stolen, including a Vermeer. If you don't know who that is, ask my wife. 13 Rembrandts. And if you don't know who Rembrandt is, shame on you. All right? And I'm a theology nerd, and I know who Rembrandt is. And several Degas valued, if you put it all together, valued at over $500 million. It remains the largest art heist in history. And it is still unsolved. Many people think it was like the Irish mafia getting involved. It gets trippy. And of course, artwork was used, by like mafia and others to get like their buddies out of prison and stuff. Sort of this hostage negotiation sort of thing. And yet none of that has happened. None of the artwork has shown up. And the thing is you're not going to display stolen work of Rembrandt in your living room. And some of the artwork was ripped out of the frame. It's a crazy story. And there's one of the guys that was taped up and stuff, one of the security guards. A lot of people suspect he was involved. It's a crazy story. All right, we got to move on. We do have to talk about the Bible. Let me give you one more recently. Maybe you've been watching the news. First of all, why have you been? It's bad for your soul at this point. But here you go. The Louvre, or Louvre. October 19th, 2025, Sunday, while everybody in France was worshiping. We know better than that because Muslims worship on Saturday. Anyways, so take that out of the video. Here is one of the largest, I can't say the word jury heists in history, stole the crown jewels. And they used this ladder right here. Just climbed up there. I mean, they went on like, what's the, when they steal the Declaration of Independence, National Treasure? They went on National Treasure and stole just millions of dollars worth of, and in fact, we can't even say millions of dollars because not everything had insurance on it because they could not price it. It was literally priceless. And it's gone. And the fear is they're going to melt it down so that then you can sell it. I mean, this is crazy. And it happened during the day. So there are video of people who, one who was a couple, they're out there taking, their photos. They're out there in Paris and, doing all the little stuff that people in love do, and discussing. And while that's happening, there's these cats stealing these priceless jewels. And they're all like, we're about to go into Literary. And well, you ain't now. It's gone. You missed your chance taking your selfies out on the street. So this is the world we live in, a world of thievery and theft. And this command, like the others that precede it, is pretty straightforward. It shouldn't be complicated, but I do think there is a lot there worth exploring. Let's start with the word, because it's two words. Really, it's one word. It's negation of that word. You shall not steal. Now, I'm just curious, what translations do we have represented here? I'm using ESV. What translations you have? NIV. What word you got? I bet it's steal. Okay, what other translations we got? The King James? Oh, ESV. Okay, all right. I didn't think you were using King James. Don, you got the message?
Not yet.
Okay, all right. What other translations we got? We got more in ESV and NIV. New King James. I bet it says steal, don't it?
It says steal, yes.
Steal. All right. What other translations we got? I bet it says steal, don't it? All right. What else? Let's pretend someone has the Net Bible. I bet it says steal, doesn't it? Sure does.
It says
No stealing. That's close enough. All right. The message always has to be so different, doesn't it? Eugene Peterson, bless his heart, and may he rest in peace. Well, and the reason I know that is because I looked up dozens of English translations, going all the way back to John Wycliffe, the first English translation, 14th century. He translated from the Latin into English. Later is Tyndale that translates the Greek and Hebrew into English. They all say the same thing except one. But technically, it says the same thing. I'm going to throw it up here. Anyone ever read the Amplified Bible? Are you familiar with that? Kind of an older translation. I mean, not real old. It's a modern translation. This is what it says. Now, I copied and pasted from the internet, so you know it has to be true. Okay? Amplified Bible, Exodus 20, verse 15. You shall not steal, parentheses, secretly, openly, fraudulently, or through carelessness. That was the most unique translation I could find. It's in there. I looked it up on multiple websites. So I use Bible Gateway. I also went to Bible Hub. I went to multiple, and they all have that. I've never seen, I've not read a lot of the Amplified Bibles, not my cup of tea, but so it's like they put an explanatory note in the translation. Now, all of that is true. I don't think it belongs there, but all that is true, as we'll see. But that's the closest I could get to a different translation. It still says, don't steal. Yeah. That's right. But so the word is pretty easy to translate. So, and they all agree. It means, in this context, do not steal. But I do want to look a little closer at the word. First meaning means do not steal. The etymology of the word is it means aside, like to hurt aside or to take aside, to put aside. And thus it is related to a thief that takes and puts it aside. And of the 40 uses of this exact word in the Old Testament, they're almost always translated as steal. We'll see a few differences, but it's almost always steal. But it means not just steal. If we want a little bit more nuance, it can also be used in the context of deception, or even like persuasion. So, for example, in Genesis 31, we get, and Jacob tricked, there's your word, tricked Laban the Aramean by not telling him that he intended to flee. Now, you remember the irony of the story of Jacob is Jacob means deceiver. And in the story, the deceiver is deceived by Laban. But the deceiver gets his revenge by deceiving the one who deceived the deceiver. And you remember later, or part of the story, is his two wives, which he got out of deception, ends up deceiving their father who deceived their husband. You know, it's a crazy story of deception. It's fallen world that we live in. But the word tricked here literally means stole the heart. It means deception, deceiver. Something similar in 2 Samuel. This is Absalom in politics. Because Absalom did all of Israel who came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. Very similar idea that we have in Jacob. It's the idea of persuaded or campaigned or deceived. You know, I guess depending on your perspective. If you are the chief of staff of Absalom, you say, well, he just persuaded. He made a better argument. He'd be a better king than David, you know, when David was up for re-election. But if you're chief of staff for David, you're thinking, well, he deceived the people and kicked us out of office. But it's the same words, to steal the heart. Steal the heart. And so at times then, what we see is the Bible merges the idea of theft and deception because the two ideas are similar. Think about what deception is. It is stealing from someone and really replacing it with what isn't true or a distortion of that truth. You're taking from them. And so, for example, in Joshua 7:11, Israel has sinned. They have transgressed my covenant. They have taken some of the devoted things, so they stole. They have stolen and lied. That word lied is the idea of deception. And it's also, of course, connected to the next commandment. You shall not bear false witness. And so you can see the two ideas are put together. I don't know if did I put Zechariah? No, I didn't put Zechariah up there. There's another Zechariah 5:3 if you're wanting a reference. So it is not an accident then that the command not to steal is followed by that command not to bear a false witness. Here's the third meaning of the word, the way it's used in the Bible, and that is stealth. This idea really probably lies at the root of the word. At its core, it means to be stealthy. I'll give you one example of this. By the way, I have a lot of Bible verses, so you're not going to be able to complain we didn't talk about the Bible. Job 4:12. Now a word was brought to me stealthily. That's weird English, but he's communicating a Hebrew idea. My ear received the whisper of it. It's deception, but a lie came to him deceptively in stealth is the idea. And this, of course, is what the serpent does to Eve, is he deceives, and thus he steals her heart, if you will. Now, let me give you just some examples. One of the things you'll find that I find fascinating is the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible. There is law and there is narrative. And what you get is, it looks like the narratives are there to help lay a story foundation to understand the law. And so, like, you'll find the patriarchs break every single law that is in the Mosaic law. It's like, okay, so what do I mean by this command? Well, you remember the story of Jacob? It's kind of the way it works. And so we get this with stealing. We have several examples in the Bible of people stealing things. For example, Rachel stealing from Laban. Remember that Jacob stole the heart of Laban, which is followed by Rachel stealing the household images. These are idols. And archaeology has told us why this happened. For the longest time, the story, a lot of people thought, was anachronistic at best, that it probably was made up because it didn't make any sense. Why steal images that you could just have created elsewhere? That's what everyone else does. And what we have found through archaeology is there are certain images that get passed down through generations. They're often associated with ancestral worship or veneration. And so if you take and you possess those images, you possess all that person has. You inherit everything the family has. And so you remember that Rachel hides it under her clothes and refuses to get up, and so they never find it. And as a result, Jacob not only takes much of Laban's wealth, which was stolen from Jacob, remember, with all deception, but now he possesses the inheritance, basically. And so she does it through stealing. Or consider the story of Joseph. What does Joseph say? We're going to come back to Joseph. He's important. For I indeed was stolen out of the land of the Hebrews, and here I am. So how does he understand his slavery? He understands it as a form of theft. I was stolen. And he's not wrong. Or consider how the sons of Jacob steal from Joseph. Remember that Joseph sets them up. He puts the little cup in there, and then they find, you stole from Joseph, who showed you all this kindness. So we get this, the money we have found in the mouths of our sacks we brought back to you from the land of Canaan. How then could we steal silver and gold from your Lord's house? All right, so it's the same idea. Now it's deception on both ends, So they're guilty of stealing, supposedly, but also they've been deceived. So Joseph is stealing from his brothers, basically. He is deceiving their hearts, stealing their hearts. Let me give you just one more. David is said to recover the bones of Saul and Jonathan. But the word used is steal. Because the men of Jabesh Gilead stole them from the Philistines. Now, on the one hand, it's not theft. It's almost something of honor, isn't it? If say we had an American held hostage and they are killed, okay, I'm okay if the Marines go in there and get that body, right? And the American in me will wave the American flag and say, that ain't stealing, that's justice, right? So you can see that. But the word used is the same one here in Exodus 20. You stole. You took it from someone. Now, interestingly, what I find, and we can look at this in the other commandments, the Bible often, when it describes the wickedness of Israel, lumps this group of commandments together. So don't kill, don't steal, don't commit adultery, all that. So let me just give you these. I don't know if I have both of them up here or not. Yeah.
So, would you say it's kind of a stretch for me to think? So the reason when Abraham and God asked Abraham to leave his land behind, that this is that's including leaving the idols behind, all that, so that he's disowning his ancestry, like that's the kind of sacrifice that's being made. Am I making any sense?
A little. Yeah.
So if they killed the idols, right, because that's their ancestry, God's wanting to start fresh.
So when Abraham moves and he leaves behind the idols and stuff,
Yeah.
he's walking away from idolatry. Yeah. Of course, the problem is later his grandson Jacob perpetuates the idolatry by bringing Laban's idols. But Jeremiah 7:9, will you steal, murder, commit adultery, swear falsely, make offerings to Baal, and go after other gods? So notice that's the first commandment is the last, first two. And then he mentions these regarding the neighbor. And it's a similar order. I think I took out Hosea. I had so many verses, I took some out. No, I did put it up here. Hear the word of the Lord, there is no faithfulness or steadfast love and no knowledge of God in the land. There is swearing, lying, murder, stealing, committing adultery. They break all bonds, and bloodshed follows bloodshed. It's an interesting little summary there. It's saying, look all around. These very basic laws that should be universal, you can't even get those straight. And by the way, we could say the same thing about America, couldn't we? Okay, so that's the word, right? The Bible lays it out for us. It's very clear. It gives us some examples of it. In terms of application, okay, so we understand. What do we do with this? Where do we see this practically in the Bible, in our lives? Here's the first one, stealing as it relates to kidnapping and slavery. We saw this with Joseph. But due to the word's connection to stealth, some scholars like to argue that it's primarily about that. But it's really, it's a bit limiting. It really, and they connect it to kidnapping, that you're sneaking in and you're taking from another nation for the purpose of slavery. By the way, this is the history of humanity, and it still is the history of humanity. It is only in Christian lands, if I can use that language, I don't really care for all that much, but if it is in Christian lands where there is any discussion of the wickedness of slavery. Throughout all of history, slavery was common. One of the reasons you go to war is because you need to perpetuate the slave labor. I mean, that's why you do it. Whether it's Europe, Asia, or Africa, or the Americas. It's everywhere you go. Pick any nation, pick any race, pick any time in history. This is the way it works. And so, do you think the Ishmaelites, when they saw Joseph in a pit, do you think they asked a lot of questions? No, because they probably had a train of slaves behind them that they picked up along the way too. This was common. The amount of suffering that has happened, what's interesting is, despite the ubiquitousness of kidnapping and slavery, of course you would kidnap for the purpose of slavery, whether as prisoners of war or whatever, is that the Bible condemns it. Let me give you a few examples here. By the way, this is a capital offense. Exodus 21, so the very next chapter where we're at, whoever steals a man, there's that word, it's the same word. Whoever steals a man and sells him, we call that slavery. And anyone found in possession of him, notice the one who sells and the one who owns, they both shall be put to death. Now, for all you want to say about how the Bible doesn't condemn slavery, you can look at the South in America and you have a problem on your hands. If you have sold, whether you participate in the slave trade, you've kidnapped or whatever, if you have sold or own a slave, by Mosaic law, executed. Now, I understand some will come in here, well, it's really about warfare and the kidnapping. So the issue is you're bringing Gentiles in. Fine, make that conclusion. But it is very clear you do not do this. You don't do it. Deuteronomy 24, if a man is found stealing one of his brothers of the people of Israel, and he treats him as a slave or sells him, then that thief shall die. So you shall purge the evil from your midst. You don't treat other Hebrews like this. Now, you can understand why this is. This is Deuteronomy. This is the generation that came out of slavery. And so the message is that the generation of slaves do not enslave. They, more than anyone, should understand the wickedness of this institution. And I'm teaching through the story of Solomon at the Capitol, and we were at the construction of the temple today at lunch. And we're not able to go into a lot of details, but if you read the building of the temple, you know how Solomon builds the temple? Much of it is off the back of slaves. And what's interesting in the story of Solomon is in the opening story of Solomon is when he gets his wisdom, all that, the part that we love about Solomon, is that it tells us he married Pharaoh's daughter. Now, the irony there is, here is a descendant of slaves, Egyptian slaves. Now he is marrying the Pharaoh's daughter. Just look where all these once slaves have now become so mighty, Pharaoh is having to reckon with them. But then we find this descendant of slaves now has slaves, and he is putting in the work on the grandest project in Jewish history. It's really sad, isn't it? And it violates this. I think I got one more here. Oh, this is New Testament. Does New Testament say this? Understand this, that the law is not laid down for the just, but for the lawless and disobedient, obviously, for the ungodly and sinners, for the unholy and profane, and for those, and I skipped a lot of them just for the sake of time, who are enslavers. And of course, there's others. It includes liars, perjurers, whatever else contrary to sound doctrine. Now, again, consider those who are victims of such slavery in the Bible. We talked about Joseph. He's the obvious one. It is an act of injustice. Remember, the story of justice is about going down and coming up. So he's in the land of promise, and he goes down into the pit. He goes down into Egypt, and he's elevated briefly on a Potiphar, but he goes down into the prison. And in the Bible, pit and prison are roughly the same ideas, but the pit is a picture of death. The Sheol is often described as the pit, and it's the grave. And so he goes down and down, and then the story is one of resurrection. He goes up and up. So he goes up to be second in command. And then eventually his bones will go back up to the land of Canaan. And so it's a story of grace, yes, but he goes down into slavery. And the story is clear. What his brothers did was wicked. And they have to be condemned. But there's another story that involves kidnapping and slavery. I don't think I have the verse up there. Genesis 14:10. It is the story of Lot. Well, Lot gets kidnapped. Right? Remember, Lot goes off towards Sodom, and he gets kidnapped, and he gets turned to a slave. And so Abraham, that we were talking about earlier, Abraham decides to round up the boys. They're all rednecks, And he says, boys, we've been waiting for this day. We're going to go to war. And they all fire their shotguns into the air and said, let's go. And they go and rescue Lot, and freeze him. And it's a neat little story, but it's an odd story. But there were 318 captives that Abraham manages to rescue. And this leads to a big battle, and in that context we meet Melchizedek. So this, of course, has immense implications regarding slavery of all forms. And this is why we, even now, if we go to war and we capture soldiers of the people we are at war with, we have regulations that we have put on ourselves. We will not torture. We do not enslave them. You understand, this is unique in history. There's no Geneva Convention in the days of Jesus or in the days of David. If in fact, you'll find, this is really the story of King Saul. It would be better if you died on the battlefield than if you were captured. Because you're going to be tortured, and it's going to be miserable for what life that you have left. And if you are a woman whose village or a city gets attacked, and you are not successful, and the enemy wins, you would be better off dead. That was the idea. And we have plenty of examples of families, committing mass suicide because that was a better conclusion than to be captured. That would not be tolerated in the United States of America. And we do have times in our nation where accusations of torture and other things have come up from America against our military enemies. And it is roundly condemned by the left and the right, as it should be. Why? Because this is something we condemn. And I think the Bible condemns it. Here's another one, probably the one that you want to talk about the most. That is property. What does this say about property? It should be worth noting, stealing personal property is not given the death penalty. Okay, so remember that. Now the Bible leaves room for self-defense, all that. We talked about that under the command about murder. But so I think it's worth looking at. You're in chapter 20. Skip over to chapter 22, if you will. So you get the Ten Commandments, and each of these commandments, largely speaking, are expanded upon elsewhere in the law. So these are basically a summary of it, the Bill of Rights, if you will. So we have 10 Bill of Rights. They have the 10 words. So chapter 22, verse 1. No commentary on this, just you can see sort of how this works. If a man steals an ox or a sheep or his Dodge truck and kills it or sells it, he shall repay 5 oxen for an ox, 4 sheep for a sheep. Notice this is recompense. If you steal one man's bike, you got to give him 4 bikes of equal value, each of them of equal value. And the idea is it's not worth the cost. So that's the idea, obviously. Verse 2, if a thief is found breaking in and is struck so that he dies, here's your self-defense, there shall be no blood guilt for him. But if the sun has risen on him, there shall be blood guilt for him. He shall surely pay. If he has nothing, he shall be sold for his theft. If the stolen beast is found alive in his possession, whether it is an ox or a donkey or sheep, he shall pay double. If a man causes a field or vineyard to be grazed over, or lets his beast loose and it feeds in another man's field, he shall make restitution from the beast and the best in his own field and his own vineyard. The Bible has a lot to say about your domesticated animals, your farm animals. You're responsible for them. So if your goat goes in someone else's yard and eats all their crops or whatever, that is like you stealing from your neighbor. Yeah. So I guess, what comes to mind is when I was in retail, kids would break things. And so what we would do, because we're a Christian bookstore, we would charge people what we paid for it, not what we were selling it for, as a sort of way to say, look, I know it's hard to raise kids, but we've got to replace this. And we're actually out of money because of shipping. We didn't charge shipping or anything. So anyways, verse 6, if fire breaks out and catches in thorns so that the stacked grain or the standing grain or the field is consumed, he who started the fire shall make full restitution. We do this now. In fact, we found the guy that caused the California fires, didn't we? And think about the amount of property. He can never pay that back. But we understand there needs to be some restitution, some justice. Verse 7, if a man gives to his neighbor money or goods to keep safe, and it is stolen from the man's house, then if the thief is found, he shall pay double. If the thief is not found, the owner of the house shall come near to God to show whether or not he has put his hand to his neighbor's property. For every breach of trust, whether it is for an ox or a donkey or sheep or cloak or any kind of lost thing, of which one says, this is it, the case of both parties shall come before God. The one who God condemns shall pay double to his neighbor. That's somewhat similar to the Solomon story with the woman who stole the child. You're familiar, the two harlots, very similar to that. The king would be the Supreme Court, if you will. Verse 10, if a man gives to his neighbor a donkey or an ox or sheep or any beast to keep safe, and it dies or is injured or is driven away without anyone seeing it, an oath by the Lord shall be between them both to see whether or not he has put his hand on his neighbor's property. The owner shall accept the oath. He shall not make restitution. But if it is stolen from him, he shall make restitution to its owner. If it is torn by beasts, let them bring it as evidence. He shall not make restitutions for what has been torn. Verse 14, if a man borrows anything of his neighbor, it is injured or dies, the owner not being with it, he shall make full restitution. If the owner was with it, he shall not make restitution. If it was hired, it came for its hiring fee. You see the point, is the Bible goes through that okay, it is one thing to say don't steal, but the law requires specificity in carrying out justice. And that's what you're going to get. So one of the things that frustrates me is that it shouldn't be complicated, don't steal. But we humans are so depraved, we're really creative in our depravity. So we have to come up with regulations for what ought to be obvious. All you have to do is say, was that yours? No. Then it is not going to be yours. Leave it alone. But we have to do all this. Well, what about this situation? What about that situation? So you see the Bible expands on it. But in the ancient Near Eastern world, what helps with this is that you don't have fence lines. Like we have a fence, and we're responsible for what's there, and that's our property. You don't have that in the ancient world because wood was hard to come by. They burned a crazy amount of wood to make weapons and other stuff. During the Bronze Age, the amount of wood that it would take to make swords and shields, you just end up cutting down all the trees. By the way, this is what made America so attractive. All of our trees. So if you're in England, you got no trees left. After thousands of years of just cutting them all down for weapons, America had all the timber you could want. It's really how America sort of got out of the war and all this. Anyways, so what you have described in the Bible is what are called boundary stones and stone walls. You couldn't use wood, but you could use stones, and often they would have boundary stones. You can still find these in America. So I just want to show you, this is in the Bible, didn't make it up. You shall not move your neighbor's landmark. Now, why is that? Because you are stealing his land. And we have disputes today. If you put up a fence and your neighbor comes and says, that is a foot on my property, and if you get a surveyor to come out and you find out they were right, that's rough.
Property line.
Yeah, it's, oh man. And that's what this is. You don't move that landmark. Deuteronomy 27:17, cursed be anyone who moves his neighbor's landmark. And all the people said, yeah, that's right. We don't want to do that. Because it's a form of theft. It's property. Proverbs 22:28, do not move the ancient landmark that your fathers have set. Now you see it's adding the idea of ancient. Remember, you inherit land. You don't go out and buy land. They're not settlers in that sense. God is giving them. God is the possessor of the land. Finally, I think there's others. I took some out. Hosea 5:10, the princes of Judah have become like those who moved the landmark. Upon them I will pour out my wrath like water. So it's amazing that so what you have here then is the understanding of what we would call in our language, maybe somewhat of a foreign idea in the biblical, I'm not sure, what we call private property. And is roundly condemned. Let me give you one more. Proverbs 15. The Lord tears down the house of the proud, but maintains the widow's boundaries. It's the landmark. That God doesn't want us behaving this. And so many will see here, and I think rightly so, the defense of private property. If someone comes to steal your ox, that is your private property. It's not anyone else's. And you have the right to do with it whatever you want. I mean, within certain reasons, obviously. You want to sell it, great. If you want to work it out in the field, great. It's your private property, and you're responsible for it. And no one should take it. So my land is my land. It's not your land. And it is not the government's, right? America. You know, that's been kind of the way we Americans really function and think about it, is that we own things and the government shouldn't. That's a very American idea. All right, let's look at one other application here, and that is embezzlement and bribery. Regarding embezzlement, like the Bible condemns this, obviously, we still condemn it, rightly so. Embezzlement, Amos 8, 4-7. Hear this, you who trample on the needy, saying, when will the new moon be over, that we may sell grain, and the Sabbath, that we may offer wheat for sale, that we may make the ephah small and the shekel great, and deal deceitfully with false balances. Notice there, it's inflation. We're going to artificially inflate prices, so it's shrinkflation. We'll give you less grain for a higher price. Doesn't this sound familiar? Anyone survive COVID? Everyone make it out of that? You know, you remember shrinkflation? You remember that was a made-up word that we needed? And I remember the kids were like, why are there like 3 chips in my bag? It's called shrinkflation. Right? This is what happens when you print money you don't have. It causes inflation. That is not a right or left. That is monetary value. That's how it works. If you don't believe me, study the history of comic books. Why are your comic books not worth anything anymore? If you got them in the late 80s, early 90s, they printed too many of them. The more you have, the less valuable. Anyone buy into the Thai Beanie Baby thing? Yeah, I know some of y'all did. Our famous Longaberger baskets. Why are they worthless? Because the market meant we're going to make, and it has no value. So that's what you have here. We're going to artificially shrink the product, but raise the prices. That's embezzlement. And the problem is that you are targeting the poor and making their life worse. And God condemns that. I don't know if I have this one up. Lord has sworn by his project, I'm sure that I will never forget any of their deeds. I don't think, I do have this. 1 Corinthians 6, do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived, neither any lists a bunch. Revilers nor swindlers will inherit the kingdom of God. But such were some of you. So in the congregation are those who are guilty of embezzlement, of stealing from others. And you say, well, that may be legal. Well, that's fine, but it certainly isn't moral, and God isn't pleased. And so the Bible condemns bribery. Exodus 23:8, you shall not take a bribe, for a bribe blinds the clear-sighted and subverts the cause of those who are in right. You're stealing. Same thing, Proverbs 15:27, whoever is greedy for unjust gain troubles his own household, but he who hates bribes will live. One more here, Proverbs 17:23, the wicked accepts a bribe in secret to pervert the ways of justice. The Bible clearly condemns this. By the way, how was Jesus executed? It was a violation of this command. They're guilty of murder. They're guilty of spiritual adultery, but they're also of deceit and of bribery. Here, Judas, here's your money. Okay, so let's look at the gospel. What does it have to do with Jesus? Just 2 points. This is really of application, but what does this have to do with Jesus? Okay, so I've been bought by the blood of the Lamb, right? And bought, not stolen. I never put it that way. So I've been bought by the blood of the Lamb. What does this look like? Okay, how does the gospel take this and apply it? So if this is a negative command, what does the positive look like it? 2 things worth looking at. The first is contentment/gratitude. You cannot separate those two. You will not find a person who's content that is ungrateful. You will not find a discontented person who is grateful. You cannot separate those two. Grateful people are content people. I took out several passages here, but just to give you highlights, Hebrews 13:5, keep your life free from love of money. Well, that's a good start right there. And be content with what you have, for he has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. It's the secret of contentment. It's God's presence. God will take care of us. And so the love of money will lead to embezzlement, briberies, and theft, various forms. 1 Timothy 6, but godliness with contentment is great gain, for we brought nothing to the world, and we cannot take anything out of this world. I think I took the rest of that passage out. But that it's verse 10, I believe he says, it's verse 10, the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. It's the craving of it, the appetite of it, that leads to so much bad stuff. So if you want to keep from breaking this command, the secret is the gospel gift of contentment. And the secret to contentment is gratitude. So instead of speaking of what you lack, speak first of what you have and be grateful for it. We are a miserable country because we are never content with the blessings of God. Isn't it amazing that we are the richest country, it's not even close, in the history of humanity, and we act like it ain't enough? Think about it, Christians. We are right here, not too worried about someone coming in here doing damage, certainly not from the government. Maybe we'd be grateful for that. We've been bought by the blood of Jesus. Maybe we'd be grateful for that. Yeah, I'd love to have a big old mansion with a nice hot tub in it. You know, that'd be cool. I'd like it for having indoor soccer field. I was going to say basketball goal, but I want to tease Carrie. And, you know, I'd like to win the lottery without playing it. That would be cool. But I'm grateful. I'm grateful for all the blessings the Lord has given me. And start there. Your list of what you don't have may be long, but what you have could be even longer if you have the right attitude about it. Benjamin Franklin supposedly said, contentment makes poor men rich, discontentment makes rich men poor. That is true. It's amazing, isn't it, that you can look at actors and athletes and others who are just filthy rich, and you can think, well, they must be the happiest people in the world. And they're not. There's a great article. It was in the Atlantic, I believe. You can look it up. I've referenced it before. It was of a cleaning lady who cleaned the houses of the wealthy. And she said, what I've learned is I never want to be wealthy. Behind the facade of the big houses and the perfect family and the fancy cars are depression pills galore. It's all a mask. It's because they're trying to keep what they have rather than be grateful for what they've been given. And it really just surprised her. All right, so what's the other? So the first is contentment and gratitude. The other is generosity. So the Ten Commandments, that phrase not really found in the Bible. It's the 10 words. So we've chosen a word with each commandment that helps us to really understand what's at play here. And I think the issue here, particularly on the positive side, is generosity. Those who are generous are not thieves. Generosity is not about abundance, it's about one's heart. You will never make enough money to be generous. There is not some magical number. Those who are generous in the hearts will be generous regardless of what they possess. And you will meet some of the most generous people don't have much. And it isn't always about money or gifts or any of that. The world is better if we are generous rather than stingy, entitled, or prone to the thievery. Ephesians 4:28, let the thief no longer steal, but rather let him labor, do an honest work with his own hands, so that he may have something to share with anyone in need. Notice here, the issue is not someone else should take care of them. It's I should take care of them. It's a big difference, particularly as it relates to public policy in a community. We see a need, we say, okay, we've been working hard so that we can help people in our community, and it's our responsibility. It is not, we'll make them help that person. It's no, I'm responsible. I will be generous with my time, my effort, my skills, resources, and whatnot. So contentment mixed with gratitude, generosity. Of course, you could say you can't separate generosity and gratitude, can you? Ungrateful people aren't generous. Grateful people are. I mean, I think gratitude, thanksgiving, is a core issue. I would put it there right next to love. If you can get love and gratitude, man, you'll be all right. Those are my two commandments. There you go. Go do them. I want to end with a passage. I've read this 1,000 times, but it never clicked. I came across it in my study, and I didn't know where to put it, so I put it here. I love this. I actually tweeted it. That's how much I loved it. I don't know if none of you all will see it, but I liked it. It's this, Proverbs 30. 2 things I ask of you. Deny them not to me before I die. Remove far from me falsehood and lying. Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with the food that is needful for me, lest I be full and deny you and say, who is the Lord? Or lest I be poor and steal and profane the name of my God. I like that. I like that. Isn't that what you want? It's an honest prayer. I understand with too much, I'll deny you. Too little, I know my heart, I'll deny you through my actions. Lord, provide and help me to be righteous. I like that. It's a good little summary of it. So, that is all to say, don't steal. It's a simple law. Man, we struggle with this. Oh, we struggle. A few years ago, my car was broken into while we were here on a Wednesday night. My car, my little Corolla, it's one of the reasons why I drive a 98 Corolla, is because it has been broken into a bunch. In fact, when you go to start it, I didn't drive it here today, someone tried to steal it without the key, so they took a screwdriver and just started trying to put it in the ignition. And I actually called the police on that one because it really damaged the car. Now we have a Ring camera, and it's not a Ring camera, but we have a doorbell camera, and we have caught people, roaming our streets at night. And what they're doing, so you have to lock your keys. They're looking for opportunity, and they'll just walk by and they'll just say, "Oh, that's unlocked," and they'll come in there and they'll look and they'll steal. Man, how much better would this world be? Many of you all remember, as I do, we didn't lock our doors at night. Mom and Dad's house was broken into because of that, and I was the only one that remember. That's a whole other story. I'll save it for another sermon. But we had to start locking the doors. Isn't that a better world? Because when stealing is common, you can't trust your neighbors. If you can't trust your neighbors, that's a very different society you live in. So we got to get this right. Okay, anything else y'all have? Any of them I think are still traveling, so I can't pick on him.
Well, Carol, I don't know you heard you give until it hurts, but I think you give until it makes you feel good and wonderful and praise God.
Yeah, so the way we approach giving, along with everything else, is the cross is the model. So I think that's going off my phone. The cross is the model. And so what did Jesus give? He gave everything. So what is God asking us to do? Return the same. Now what I'm not saying is we have to sell everything we have and become hermits. But it is to say that we could never outgive what God has already given us. And so when it comes to our generosity, we look at Jesus and say, yeah, maybe I am being a little stingy. My mom, when she talks about OCC, she's not a regional leader anymore, but she's been here to talk about it. She's gone to Africa several times to give out the shoe boxes. And she has a photo she keeps of kids that there weren't enough shoe boxes for all the kids. And so one of them is, trying to sneak through the gate. It's really sad. And she prints like 1,000 of them, and she passes them around to everybody. And what she says is I always think, okay, I'm done with shoe boxes. And then I think about that child. I think, I could do one more. I think that's the Christian attitude. Again, you don't have to sell everything and all that. And I understand that sometimes helping can hurt, and there's policy stuff, all that. But our attitude ought to be, Jesus Christ gave everything for me. Now, that's a better world. It matches Acts 2 a lot more. Anything else?
I just noticed that the coveting commandment comes right after it.
Well, we get false witness is the 9th, and then it's coveting. Yeah, so coveting is going to be the foundational issue. So as we said that idolatry summarizes what follows. Coveting summarizes everything that precedes it. Because you're coveting other gods rather than the real God. You're coveting another man's wife or another man's daughter or whatever, so you're committing adultery. So coveting leads to stealing. It's the obvious application. I want something you have. And I can either be content with what I have, or I can go take it. Or ruin it so that you don't have more than I have. One of the things I think dads have to teach their boys in particular is that men know there's only one person in this world that hopes that you outshine them, and that's your dad. No one wants you to have more than they have. That is a human condition, and covetousness gets right at the heart of that. That's good stuff. We'll be there hopefully in 2 weeks. Anything else? Good deal. I'm interested to see what we come up with false witness. I think there's more there than I know. Okay, if nothing else.